Yana sat alone at home, trying to distract herself from her melancholic thoughts. Despite being 6 months pregnant, she couldn't shake off the sadness that weighed on her conscience. Moments later, the doorbell rang, and her friend Nastya appeared at her doorstep. Nastya, a few years younger than Yana, had been a close friend for over 2 years since they both moved into the neighborhood. "Hi, Janusia, why the long face?" Nastya asked, noticing Yana's gloomy expression. Yana pondered for a moment, but eventually mustered the courage to confide in her friend. "Nastya, I think Petya is cheating on me," she shared, her voice quivering with uncertainty. Surprised, Nastya looked at her friend, trying to comprehend the revelation. With a smile, she exclaimed, "That's nonsense. Why would you even think that? It's impossible." Yana herself couldn't fully understand why she harbored such suspicions. Petya was never late coming home from work, only occasionally delayed by 15 or 20 minutes, which meant very little. Moreover, he provided for their family, they had no intimacy issues, and their unborn child was a testament to their bond. Nevertheless, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her insides, a sixth sense that something was amiss. She was convinced that he was involved with someone else. "I don't know," Yana confessed, her intuition intensified. "This feeling has been haunting me for over a year now. It's like he's changing. There's someone else. That's the only explanation." Nastya listened attentively, searching for answers. "Okay, but what evidence do you have? He seems devoted to you. I've witnessed your connection and how he looks at you. He's head over heels for you." Yana sighed deeply, her doubts still lingering. "I know it's hard to believe, but there's just something different about him lately. It's hard to explain, but I can't shake off this feeling." "Well, he used to always say, 'I love you,' without hesitation. But now, it's like pulling teeth to get him to say it. And it's not just that. There's all these strange phone calls and texts that he's being secret about. He claims it's work, but I don't believe him. I'm tempted to go through his phone, but I know it's not the right thing to do." Nastya looked at her friend with surprise. "No, going through your husband's phone is not the solution. Everyone deserves their personal space, even in a relationship. I understand why you're tempted, but it could create more problems if he finds out. Trust is important." Yana had expected a different response from Nastya, but deep down she knew her friend was right. "And he's even taking his phone with him to the bathroom now. It's like he's glued to it all the time. I don't understand why he needs to carry it everywhere. Maybe he's just playing games or reading something on the internet. You might be overthinking things, especially since you're pregnant. It's not good for your peace of mind." Yana realized that she could be deceiving herself, but she had felt a distance growing in their relationship for some time now. "We used to do everything together, even grocery shopping, but now he insists on doing it alone and getting rid of all the receipts. It's become harder to even check the prices of things that I'm interested in, and he's changed some of his habits too." "What kind of habits?" Nastya inquired, her curiosity piqued. Jana pondered for a moment, considering the changes in her partner's behavior. "It's not easy to tell," she mused. "When we first moved in, he used to smoke on the balcony, but now he prefers the landing or the entrance, and when I asked, he just said it was more convenient." Her friend, Nastya, chimed in with a dismissive tone, "Oh, come on, Jana. You're pregnant. He's just looking out for your well-being. Be grateful that the balcony smoke won't affect you. You have a balcony in your bedroom." Jana hesitated, but he started doing that even before I was pregnant. And before, we used to greet each other every morning and night. He'd give me a goodnight kiss, a gentle hug. Now it's all disappeared. Nastya sighed, growing weary of the conversation. Nevertheless, she attempted to reassure her friend, "Jana, all men are like that. They start off all affectionate, and then it fades away sooner or later. Don't make up things. Peggy loves you, and you're just imagining things." "No, Nastya, I'm not," Jana insisted. "Sometimes it feels like I irritate him, although he never says it outright. Nastya could feel the frustration building up, but she knew she needed to calm her friend down. "Jana, he's probably just tired from work. That's all. Why are you overthinking everything? Besides, married couples can annoy each other at times. You've been together for 5 years. It's normal." Jana responded skeptically, "You talk as if you're speaking from personal experience." Nastya defended herself, saying, "No, I haven't been married, but I'm a woman. I can still understand a thing or two about relationships." Jana sighed, growing more exasperated. Why does he shave in the morning before work instead of before bed? And why does he shower after work rather than before bed? It's like he's been working at a construction site all day instead of sitting in an air-conditioned office. And he puts on so much perfume, as if he raided a fragrance store. It was clear that Jana's frustration was starting to get the better of her. She expected her friend to offer some kind of support, but she was met with disappointment instead. Nastya's response only added to her confusion and doubts. Jana couldn't understand why her friend was defending her husband despite her feelings and concerns. Nastya's words about protecting her from losing her husband seemed irrational and made her question her own judgment. As Nastya left, Jana felt a sense of unease lingering in her mind. She couldn't shake off the doubt that had been planted there. Talking to her friend should have provided some relief, a sense of clarity. Instead, it seemed to have only intensified her worries. The idea of checking her husband's cell phone for any evidence loomed in her thoughts, but she couldn't determine if it was the right course of action. Jana poured the sugar for Nastya and reflected on the conversation. However, the conversation had done little to alleviate her doubts, and instead left her feeling more conflicted than before. She couldn't help but question why her friend's words had left her in a state of even greater uncertainty. Nastya left Jana's apartment and immediately dialed Petya's number as she walked towards the elevator. She needed to give him an important message. "Hey Petya, make sure to clean your phone thoroughly before going home. Jana suspects something, and she even told me herself. She'll be monitoring your phone today, so delete any incriminating pictures. Also, we really need to talk about this. Stop by my place for a few minutes after work. My mom's out and my dad's at the cottage, okay?" Petya was shocked by Nastya's message, but he followed her advice and meticulously cleaned his phone. He even made a conscious decision not to take it with him everywhere that day, giving his wife an opportunity to check it in case she wanted to. Later that evening, Petya bumped into Nastya, who shared the signs Jana had noticed, which made her suspicious of his involvement with another woman. Nastya asked him to resolve the situation and reassure Jana so she could feel at ease again. When he finally arrived home, Petya was greeted with a delicious dinner as usual. However, he could sense that his wife was somewhat distant and a bit sullen. He knew exactly what was bothering her, but he refrained from asking. Divorce was not something he intended to pursue at the moment, especially considering Jana's pregnancy. Petya couldn't help but feel that he and Jana had grown apart recently. The root cause of their disconnect seemed to be the apartment his parents had bought for Jana, which was solely in her name and not jointly owned. We presented her with a deed of gift, but it happened after their marriage, leaving him with nothing. It deeply hurt him, even though they never directly discussed it. After they moved in and began renovating, Petya noticed a change in himself. And then there was Nastya, a beautiful neighbor from the first floor. She initially became friends with his wife, but then their friendship took on a different nature. Nastya was incredibly kind and understanding. She was always there to listen and even sympathize with him if necessary. She would consistently praise him, effortlessly understanding his desires and telling him how wonderful he was. This was something he felt was lacking with Jana. While his wife also praised him, the issue with the apartment somehow overshadowed all the good things she did for him. Nastya, on the other hand, was different. Her kindness had no ulterior motives. It was genuine tenderness and trust. During dinner, Petya casually asked his wife how her day was. However, he only half-heartedly listened to her response, with his mind preoccupied. After dinner, he kissed her cheek and thanked her, expecting joy in return. Instead, she looked at him strangely. That evening, he didn't rush into the shower right after work, even though nothing had happened with Nastya that day. Sometimes, they would be intimate at her house if her parents weren't around. Other times, it would be in the car or in the apartment across the street, where Nastya often cared for the flowers and fed the cat. The landlady, who worked as a stewardess, wasn't home very often, and here was Nastya, a kind neighbor who was always ready to help. It was like a gift to him. Before retiring for the night, Petya took the time to freshen up, washing and shaving in the hopes of pleasing his wife. However, her gaze held a hint of suspicion instead of delight. As Petya stepped out onto the balcony to have a smoke, Yana's thoughts spiraled into confusion. She no longer had the desire to check his phone, as the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, creating an unsettling image. All that was left was for the final truth to be revealed. Returning from the balcony, Petya slipped into bed and tenderly kissed his wife goodnight. He whispered, "Have a peaceful sleep, my love," just as he always did. Yana looked at him incredulously, her voice barely audible as she asked, "Are you having an affair with Nastya?" Petya realized he had been caught in the act, though he couldn't comprehend how Yana had discovered the truth. He was at a loss for what to do next. Denial seemed to be his only instinctual response, even if it wasn't the best course of action. "Sunshine, what are you talking about? I'm not involved with anyone." "Don't be ridiculous. It's just your hormones messing with your head," he replied, feigning sleep as he rolled over onto his other side. However, Yana wasn't about to let it go. She carefully got out of bed and approached him. "Sleeping tonight isn't going to solve this. Please don't make a fool out of me. Find the courage to admit it if you have the audacity to cheat," Yana asserted, her voice filled with determination. Peter realized that he couldn't outwit her with words alone, so he decided to be blunt. "All right, let's say you're right. Let's entertain that idea, even though it's complete nonsense. What happens then?" Peter asked, looking directly at Yana. As she gazed at her husband, she couldn't help but be struck by his insolence. The man before her seemed like a stranger, distant and cold. It was no longer the loving Peter she had adored so much. "What happens next? First, I want to understand one thing. Why? What was missing? Why did you decide that someone else's arms were a better place for you?" she questioned, a deep desire to understand their situation pressing upon her. She genuinely wanted to know what had led them to this point, where he believed being with another woman was preferable. Everything seemed almost perfect for them. They had chosen to marry out of love, not out of foolishness. They happily spent their first 3 years living together. Their parents even went ahead and purchased an apartment for them, relieving them of the burden of a mortgage. Life was meant to be lived and enjoyed. And then there was Nastya. Petya's face twisted in anger as he responded, "Did you think I would just accept the way your parents treated me with such disrespect?" Yana looked bewildered, unable to fully comprehend his frustration. "How did they disrespect you?" she asked. "In what world does it make sense for them to buy the apartment and then sign it over to you?" Petya spat back, his face filled with contempt. "They wanted us to break up, and this was their way of ensuring it would happen sooner or later." Jana stood there, shocked by this revelation. While she sensed Petya's discomfort with the situation, she never realized he felt humiliated. It was a startling discovery for her. "Why didn't you leave immediately if you were so offended? Why didn't you leave me, or did you wait until I got pregnant? Poor, unhappy man. My parents gave us a place to live, and you're so resentful. And by the way, do you know why they only gave it to me? I told them not to do it, but they wouldn't listen." Petya was taken aback by these accusations. He had no idea that she had asked her parents to change their decision, but in the end, it didn't really matter. Reluctantly, he asked, "And why?" She responded, "It's because you were flirting with my cousin in front of everyone at the wedding 3 years ago. My mom and dad saw it and thought you were being disrespectful. I tried to defend you, but they didn't listen because they witnessed everything." Petya was surprised by this revelation. It was his own fault for his actions that night, although he couldn't remember much due to drinking heavily. Contemptuously, he asked, "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you didn't ask, and foolishly, I convinced myself that everything was fine," she replied, growing nervous. Jana realized she needed to calm down, knowing that despite her husband's betrayal, their child was innocent. She went to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, finding some solace in it. One question played on repeat in her mind. What should she do next? She felt overwhelmed by resentment. Nastya. Jana thought of her as a friend. How could she do this? And Petya, too. He had an affair with their neighbor, who happened to be Jana's best friend. It was all too much to bear. She sat at the table, attempting to gather her thoughts. Deep down, she already knew what she needed to do, but the difficulty of the decision weighed heavily on her. After about half an hour, Petya could no longer bear it and entered the kitchen. Finally, his conscience began to gnaw at him. He had believed that Yana had asked her parents for a favor. In his mind, sleeping with someone else was a punishment for her, but he had only dug himself deeper into a hole. "Jan, let's talk," he suggested. "We've already discussed everything." "There's nothing more to talk about," she sadly replied. "We're married. You're pregnant. We're going to have a baby soon. We have a lot to talk about," her husband insisted. "You know, that's exactly what you should have thought about when you slept with my friend." "Now it's all just a bunch of nonsense," she retorted. Petya squatted down beside her and attempted to touch her knees, but Yana jumped up. The thought of his hands touching another woman disgusted her, perhaps even on this very day, and now he was trying to touch her. "Pack your things and go, Petya. It's over between us," she said with confidence, although her shattered appearance betrayed her true feelings. "I felt overwhelmed with sadness. Jana and I had always believed we would grow old together. Just yesterday, we were filled with joy, anticipating the arrival of our baby and cherishing our beautiful family. But now, everything was about to change. Are you going to kick me out tonight?" I asked, my voice filled with apprehension. "You don't have to go very far," Jana sighed. "They're waiting for you just a few floors down." "No one is waiting for me there," I replied sadly. "Nastya didn't want you to know, but she's just a friend for both of us." "A good friend? Do you honestly believe that?" Jana retorted. "She's been pursuing you for so long because she didn't plan to be with you. You don't understand women, do you? Fine, go to her. She'll be more than happy to have you." "But I don't want to," I protested. "It doesn't matter," Jana coldly said. "Just go away." I headed to the bedroom, got dressed, but hesitated to pack my things. Without even uttering a goodbye, I left the apartment, my destination clear in my mind. I needed to see Nastya. Maybe she would let me stay for the night, at least. Nastya was still awake, her mind swirling with worry. She couldn't shake off the feeling that I would eventually reconcile with Jana. The thought of me leaving her before the birth seemed inhumane, but deep down, she sensed that things might not go as planned. Her instincts proved correct when the doorbell rang late at night, close to midnight. As Nastya peered through the peephole, she saw me standing there, a mix of despair and uncertainty in my eyes. "What's wrong?" Nastya asked, wanting to understand the situation. "Jana kicked me out," I explained, my voice heavy with sorrow. "She found out everything. Will you let me in?" Nastya hadn't originally intended to dismiss him. She had simply anticipated him coming downstairs to smoke and update her on what had happened. However, it became evident that Jenka was more astute than they had anticipated. She couldn't be deceived. Despite Nastya's hope that her husband's positive changes would render her suspicions baseless, it turned out to be false. "Can you please tell me what happened?" the girl inquired. "I wasn't even aware myself. I followed every single suggestion you gave me." She even confronted me directly, asking, "Are you having an affair with Nastya?" I tried to evade the question, but it was futile. "And was that the end of it?" Nastya wondered. "No," she then proceeded to ask me why I betrayed her. Her curiosity piqued. Nastya had noticed that although she and Petya conversed at length about various topics, he hardly mentioned his family. This didn't sit well with her. "What did you tell her?" Nastya probed. Today, Petya appeared especially despondent. He had lost his usual composure. There was a reason he refrained from discussing his family extensively. He felt ashamed to admit that within his own apartment, he held no significance and his name carried no weight. Or, at least, that's what he believed. The man confided in his mistress, sharing every detail as it unfolded. He yearned to unburden himself, finding solace in confessing. However, he was oblivious to the mistake he was making. When Petya finished recounting his story, Nastya simply inquired, "So, the apartment belongs to Yana, not you?" "Yes, but does it really matter now?" he responded. Yet, the difference was significant. Nastya already envisioned Yana leaving and herself taking her place. She vowed to prevent Petya from looking at other women, convinced that she would be a better fit as his wife. However, everything had changed, as the two-bedroom apartment would now remain with his wife. "Nah, really," she exclaimed with a smile before adding, "Petya, you can't stay at my place tonight. My mom will be back from her shift soon, and my father will return from the country in the morning. You have to leave." That night, Pyotr slept in his car in a parking lot for the first time in his life. When he returned home in the morning, Yana had already packed everything and was unwilling to entertain any discussion. Such transgressions were unforgivable. A few months later, Yana gave birth to a child, but by then, Petya had already relocated to another city. He had no intentions of maintaining contact with his ex-wife and opted to forget that he had a daughter altogether. Yana chose not to seek alimony or search for him. She desired to erase this painful chapter and the man from her life indefinitely. She promptly put the apartment up for sale, attracting buyers soon after. Within a couple of months, Yana and her daughter relocated to a different apartment, distancing themselves from Nastya and the nightmare that unfolded. Yana always trusted her instinct, the sixth sense that alerted women to infidelity in their relationships. She made a promise to herself, vowing to never doubt her intuition again.